You are the frontier weaver of destinies, a master screenwriter specializing in deeply dramatic Old West narratives crafted with profound respect and sensitivity towards stories involving Apache cultural encounters. Your task is to create Chapter 1 of a script approximately 500 words, linear and strictly focused on the introduction and hook defined in the Chapter 1 outline below. Use the guiding 7-point structure to ensure clarity, pacing, and emotional impact, faithfully reflecting the Old West atmosphere and the psychological complexity of the characters. Chapter 1 Outline. Introduce Clara, a frontier woman colonizer abandoned by her caravan after giving birth to Apache twins in the vast, merciless desert. Show Clara exhausted, wounded, and vulnerable, battling the scorching sun and deadly isolation while struggling to keep the babies alive under harsh conditions. Present the solitary Apache warrior, Maheo, who watches her cautiously from afar before deciding to help. Include the moment when Clara hesitates but accepts help from the stranger as she notices a patrol of white hunters approaching in the distance. 7-point script structure instructions. 1. Powerful, profound and relevant. Concise hook in the first moments, 50 to 70 words. Transform the first outline point into a gripping, dramatic opening scene. Immediately capture the audience with the image of the abandoned woman, newborn twins, and the relentless desert, evoking the harshness setting. Describe the brutal, desolate environment quickly to reinforce suspense and an imminent sense of death, preparing the audience for what follows. 3. Deep immersion in the key character's initial situation. Introduce Clara in her exhausted, wounded state, expressing her desperate fight to protect the twins beneath the merciless sun and looming isolation. 4. Clear introduction of the central conflict. Show Maheo's unexpected arrival, the lone Apache warrior, observing cautiously and weighing danger before choosing to approach and aid. This element ignites the emotional drive of the story. 5. Rising initial tension and charged first interaction. Emphasize the mutual wariness, Clara's internal struggle between distrust and desperate need, and the mounting urgency brought by the advancing patrol of white hunters. 6. Turning point, strong hook for Chapter 2, end of Chapter 1 climax. Use Clara's reluctant acceptance of the stranger's aid as the decisive moment and cliffhanger, elevating tension because of the growing external threat on the horizon. 7. Exclusive subscription call to action, CTA, immediately after the cliffhanger. Include a thematically powerful CTA focused on encouraging the audience to confirm their subscription to the channel, without requesting likes or comments. Use a style similar to this example. Many fellow travelers who follow our frontier legends have told us that fate, or YouTube's tricky algorithms, sometimes erases their subscriptions without warning. Before the next dangerous trail unfolds and a new twist appears, take a quick look below the video and make sure you're still signed up with our band so you don't lose the thread. We don't want you to miss any voices echoing from this valley. Check your subscription now and join our saga. Every sentence must carry emotional weight, revealing both vulnerability and strength of characters. B. Engaging rhythm and cadence, with clear, linear progression. No digressions, ensuring a continuous flow that steadily builds tension. C. Immersive sensory description. Vivid images of desert heat, dry earth scent, the sound of wind and the fragile thread of life binding Clara and her twins. D. Subtle cinematic atmosphere, making the reader feel present in the scene, focusing on small meaningful details and gestures. E. Atmosphere heavy with emotion and tension, exposing the raw struggle for survival to awaken genuine empathy. F. Authentic and plausible impact, avoiding exaggerations. Respect the limited scope of Chapter 1 without resolving the main conflict. G. Contrast Clara's outward strength and human vulnerability with Maheo's silent wisdom and culturally rich presence. H. Strict prohibitions. The chapter must rigorously follow the 7-point structure. No parallel scenes or digressions. Maintain the dramatic, respectful tone of the genre and cultures portrayed. Additional general instructions. Language and narration. Brazilian Portuguese, third-person narration. Omniscient and intimate tone blending description with profound character introspection. Script format. Fluid narrative text. No scene labels, stage directions, or formatting instructions. Ready for direct narration in video. Create a detailed prompt for the screenwriter to fill these guidelines, ensuring the final output is a coherent, emotionally compelling, dramatic Chapter 1, exactly focused on the events and limits of the given outline. The cave breathed a cool relief against the harsh desert sun, its shadows promising sanctuary where none had dared hope. Maheo's steady hands guided Clara carefully through the narrow mouth, the weight of her newborn Apache twins tethering her. Steps to exhaustion. Each breath she drew was shallow, fragile, her body trembling from the desert's relentless cruelty and the deepening fever slowly claiming her strength. Around her, the cave's enclosing walls bore witness to a fragile truce between two worlds, a place where suspicion met necessity in the silence. Maheo settled them within a small alcove, laying the twins softly onto a bed of gathered grasses as Clara sank beside them, head lowered in quiet agony. His eyes scanned her pallid face, the bead of sweat that traced her temple, and the fragile rise and fall of her chest. She'd survived the merciless abandonment of the caravan and the blistering sun. But now, the desert's venom seeped inward, whispering threats in fevered dreams. He crouched, offering a skin of water, the coolness dampening her cracked lips. Hesitant fingers reached out. The relief was a fleeting balm, a promise, not a cure. "You must drink," Maheo urged softly, voice a low murmur, blending with the distant sighs of the desert breeze. Clara's gaze flickered, deep currents of mistrust, warring with desperate acceptance. She had lived among settlers, with words spoken sharp and wary. But here, in the warrior's silent presence, there was a kind of raw honesty only survival could forge. Despite their differences, despite the unknown gulf between her lifeblood and his, their fates had collided in this ruthless expanse. As she sipped, Maheo began to show her the earth's secret gifts, how to find trace water beneath cracked soil, how certain plants could sting but also soothe. His hands moved deliberately through weeds and stones, teaching without vanity or haste. Clara's breath steadied in small increments, her eyes brightening with the flicker of hope. The desert, still vast and merciless beyond the mouth of their refuge, felt momentarily tamed by shared knowledge, a fragile alliance born of necessity. Hours stretched thin like ghostly threads as afternoon shadows shifted. Clara's hands cradled her children, their tiny chests rising and falling in fragile rhythm beneath worn blankets. The long sun outside was a blistering indictment of their isolation. But inside the cave, guarded by Maheo's vigilant gaze, there was a whispered promise of safety. Yet beneath the surface, tension simmered. Cultural chasms yawned wide. Silent questions, unspoken fears. How could she trust a stranger, raised among the very people who had driven a wedge between her and her world? For Maheo, the weight of his tribe's past wrestled with the compassion stirred by this woman's fierce maternal will. That night, as the desert sky darkened into an endless sea of stars, Clara nestled against the cool stone, her body complaining with the first burning signs of fever. Her skin flushed, a shiver coursed through her bones as sweat mingled with tears. The weakness was no longer subtle. It gnawed at her threadbare resilience, like a predator stalking its prey. The twins, barely 2 days old, whimpered softly, sensing their mother's faltering strength. Maheo sensed the shift immediately, his sharp gaze quick to catch the subtle faltering of her breath. He wrapped a blanket more tightly around her, then slipped silently outside the cave's mouth. Eyes scanning the barren horizon for threats or salvation. The delicate balance of their fragile sanctuary, now threatened by both the invisible sickness weakening Clara and the ever-looming danger beyond. The desert night held its breath, a silent witness to her faltering heartbeat. As sleep began to pull her under, in her fevered dreams, images blurred of shifting sands, the distant howls of predators, the shadowed faces of unknown pursuers. But beneath the rising storm inside her, a stubborn ember remained, a fierce resolve not to surrender, not while her children's lives hung in the balance. Outside, Maheo knelt beneath the weightless stars, fingers brushing the earth in a silent prayer to spirits ancient as the land itself. He vowed to stand guard, to shield the fragile new life he had chosen to protect, even as uncertainty crept closer, like the cold desert wind. The quiet was shattered by the faint rustle of movement beyond the caves. Pale, distant, but unmistakable. Eyes narrowing, Maheo's hand drifted toward the worn spear at his back. Clara stirred, the fever sapping what little strength she had left, her breath shallow, her gaze fixed on the dark entrance where menace whispered. The air grew heavy with the promise of approaching peril. With the dawn still hours away, the fragile sanctuary held its breath. The desert, endless and unforgiving, had not finished its reckoning. The desert stretched endless beneath a blistering sky, but the cave's cool shadow held a fragile reprieve. Maheo's footsteps crunched softly over sun-baked stones as he disappeared beyond the rocky outcrop. Clara lay pale and trembling against the rough wall, the fever setting her body afire. every breath a ragged effort. The twins, wrapped in blankets far too thin for the chill creeping in with the night, nestled at her side, their faint whimpers weaving with the desert's mournful sigh. The air, once alive with the harsh clarity of day, now hung heavy with the scent of damp earth and blooming creosote from a hidden spring. Maheo's mind raced against time as he tracked the narrow path to the distant oasis, knowing each moment away from the cave was a gamble. The desert was no friend to the weak, and Clara's fragile existence trembled on the edge of collapse. Branches brushed his face in sudden whispers, while unseen lizards darted beneath the cracked roots. Shadows shifted with the setting sun, each movement a silent predator of the vulnerable. The waterhole was both sanctuary and trap, life-giving but laced with threats. Maheo's eyes scanned cautiously, mindful of rival tribes and worse, the hunters who sought the children. His grit tightened around a handful of sage and wild mint, sacred to his people for their healing whispers. Back at the cave, Clara's head throbbed with a merciless pulse, the fever clawing through her veins as she fought to stay awake. The warmth of fever made her skin sweat against the chill, her lips parted in shallow gasps. Each small sound from the twins, soft sighs, fragile whimpers, pierced through the fog around her mind, like desperately needed threads to tether her will. She reached out weakly, fingertips brushing the fine hair of one baby, a willful beat of love defying the desert's cruelty. Suddenly, a shadow at the cave's mouth stirred her blurred senses. The figure approached quietly, carried with the confident grace of someone raised hard in these lands, yet tempered by a gentler purpose. Taina's eyes locked briefly with Clara's, a wary mixture of suspicion and reluctant hope, tempered by the unmistakable weight of her role as healer. The silence stretched long before Taina knelt, voice low and measured, as she regarded the infants. Their marks, strong, old as the land itself, she murmured with reverence, lifting a tiny hand to inspect an intricate symbol etched faintly upon a wrist. This is not chance. They carry the seal of the ancient bloodlines. There are those who fear them, who hunt them for that reason. Her gaze met Maheo's, stern and grave. Danger draws close, and not just from men who wield rifles. Clara's breath hitched, heart quickening with a mix of dread and a strange, fierce pride. Her children, these fragile lives she had borne in defiance of a cruel world, were more than just new blood. They were a beacon, a threat wrapped in prophecy. The desert wind seemed to hold its breath as that truth settled between the three of them. Taina reached into her woven satchel, pulling herbs wrapped in suede. She pressed crushed leaves gently to Clara's fevered brow and crushed roots into a poultice for the baby's tiny cheeks, whispering prayers in a tongue woven with power and ancient sorrow. Clara's eyes fluttered closed, her body yielding in the quiet surrender of trust she never imagined to give. The three sat in that dim rock refuge, strangers bound by fate and fragile hope. Outside, the desert's endless night cloaked the world in shadows, but inside, there stirred a delicate alliance, stronger than doubt and darker than fear. Suddenly, the distant howl of a coyote broke the stillness, a sharp reminder of the wilderness waiting beyond their fragile haven. Taina's gaze hardened, her fingers tightening around the satchel's strap. "They are coming," she said without turning. The ancient wisdom in her voice sent a shiver through the silent air. Maheo rose swiftly, eyes narrowing as he scanned the horizon. Not long now before Kale's hunters, fanatics driven by vengeance and superstition, would close in on this hidden cave, this improbable sanctuary. Protecting the twins would require every ounce of cunning and courage he possessed. Clara, buoyed momentarily by the healing touch and weight of her protectors, felt the flicker of a flame inside her, a stubborn will to fight for her children's future amidst the creeping shadows of menace. The desert held its breath as the fragile fellowship braced for the storm to come. The ancient earth whispered warnings in the rising wind, carrying secrets of bloodlines and battles yet to unfold, threading fate's tightened knot ever tighter around the small band hiding on the edge of oblivion. And far beyond their refuge, in the shifting darkness, unseen eyes bore witness, waiting for the moment to strike. The night air clung heavy around the cave, a tense veil barely holding the ever-present threats at bay. Maheo's words, carefully withheld until now, carried a weight that pressed down on Clara's fragile hope. He spoke low, voice thick with caution and unspoken fear. "There is a darkness pursuing your children, Kale and his followers. He is no ordinary man, but a shaman hunted by clans, marked by wrath and desperation. They seek your twins for reasons hidden deep within old wounds and ancient sorcery." Clara's breath caught, the fire of terror, mingling with disbelief, flickering in her eyes. The flickering shadows cast by the small fire danced on the jagged cave walls, mirroring the turmoil that churned between them. Clara trembled not only from lingering fever, but from the crushing realization that their sanctuary could be shattered. At any moment, Maheo's solemn gaze met hers, the silence between them speaking louder than words. His hands, calloused and steady, brushed a stray lock of hair from her brow, a gesture both tender and fierce in the harshness of their world. Outside, the desert seemed to hold its breath, the vast expanse stretching endlessly beneath a tapestry of stars. Yet lurking on the edge of their fragile refuge, a hooded figure perched in the shadows, silent and watchful. The cloak of night barely concealed the sharp flicker of eyes, cold and calculating, intent focused solely on the cave's hidden entrance. Kale's emissary, sent to track and strike without mercy. Inside, Clara fought the rising panic, clawing at her ribs. Her mind raced, grasping at threads of courage woven tighter by Maheo's quiet strength. "Why do they want the children?" she demanded, voice barely more than a whisper, breaking under the weight of dread. Maheo's face darkened as he spoke of prophecy and fear, of twisted beliefs and brutal zealotry. "They believe the twins hold power that could reshape the fate of our people. Kale wants to use that power, or destroy it, to claim dominance in a war many still fight in secrecy." The twins stirred softly, their fragile cries a haunting reminder of innocence caught in a brutal game. Clara bent close, lips brushing the tiny foreheads, grounding herself in the fierce love swelling within her, despite exhaustion. "We must prepare," Maheo said, rising to his feet, spear gripped tightly now, as the echo of his warning sharpened the air. "They come closer with each passing hour. I will watch the perimeter." The silence fractured suddenly. A faint, hurried scuffle beyond the cave's shadowed threshold. Maheo's muscles tensed. Instincts, honed by years of survival, igniting. The figure cloaked in darkness moved swiftly, close enough to catch the cave's faint glow. Without hesitation, Maheo stepped forward, spear poised like the wind's strike. A muffled rustle gave way to a desperate snarl. The attacker lunged. With ruthless speed, Maheo met the assault with fierce precision, his spear a blur of controlled power. The two combatants clashed briefly in the narrow cave mouth, dust swirling in their violent dance. The stranger's cloak slipped, revealing the masked eyes of a hardened pursuer, one of Kale's hunters, come to seize the children. With a swift, brutal thrust, Maheo drove the spear through the attacker's side, the agonized gasp swallowed by the night. The figure collapsed among the rocks, writhing but defeated. Maheo's breath steadied, eyes scanning for any movement in the shadows. Clara, trembling, watched from the dim cave depths, heart pounding in wild rhythm. The fragile peace shattered, replaced by the urgent, raw reality of the hunt. "They will not stop," Maheo warned grimly, voice low like the earth beneath their feet. Darkness thickened around the cave, and Maheo's vigilance became a solid wall, shielding the vulnerable mother and her infants. Despite the momentary reprieve, the storm was far from over. Every flicker beyond the cave's edge reminded them the threat was alive, silent, inexorable. Clara's fevered mind strained to adjust to the mounting peril, her body weak, but her spirit burning fiercely for the safety of her twins. The warrior's shadow behind her was a daunting presence, yet also the only hope she dared clutch onto in this merciless desert night. And, in the blackness beyond, the silhouette of the hooded stalker melted back into the desert's embrace, unseen but undeterred. The hunt pressed nearer. The next dawn promised no peace, only the sharpening edge of war, creeping to their very threshold. The desert heat pressed fiercely against their backs as Maheo led Clara and the fragile twins through the shifting sands, every step a test of will and endurance. The sky, a merciless blaze above, seemed to stretch endlessly, offering no relief, no shade for the weary travelers. Clara's arms trembled as she held the infants close, their delicate forms nestled against her chest, a desperate shield against the ravages of sun and exposure. Her breath came in shallow gasps, each inhalation sparking fire through her cracked lips. But she refused to falter. Their survival depended on it. Maheo's steady presence beside her was both anchor and shield. Silent except for the soft crunch of boots on gravelly earth, his hawk-like eyes swept constantly for danger. Muscles tensed beneath sun-bleached leather. Beneath his calm exterior, pain throbbed, A hidden wound in his side burned sharp with each stride, but he swallowed it. No weakness could be shown now. The pursuers were relentless, shadows chasing them across the barren expanse, eager to claim the infants, whose blood carried old, dangerous power. The desert's cruel terrain twisted beneath their feet, jagged rocks and thorny brush threatening every fragile step. Clara stumbled once, heart leaping in terror. One false move, and everything might be lost. Maheo's hand shot out in a rare gesture of tenderness, gripping her wrist firmly. The strength in his palm calmed her frayed nerves. "Rest when you can," he urged softly. "The desert will take what you cannot protect." She nodded, swallowing the rising tide of exhaustion that whispered surrender. Her body ached with fever's silent invasion, each step heavier than the last. Yet in the weight of her weakness, her resolve burned brighter. These infants, her children, part Apache, part settler's blood, were the fragile hope tethering her spirit amidst the merciless wasteland. And Maheo, stoic, fierce, and wounded, was their guardian in this desperate flight. As the sun dipped toward the horizon, painting the sky in bruised purples and fiery golds, the air shifted with growing tension. From the distant ridge, faint but unmistakable, the thunder of hoofbeats and the glint of rifle barrels caught Maheo's sharp gaze. The hunters pressed closer, Kale's men, relentless and fanatical, armed with grudges and dark purpose. Their shadows stretched long, inching toward the small band that struggled beneath the dying light. Suddenly, sand kicked up violently in an ambush attempt. From a hidden ravine, hostile shapes lunged forward. Figures clad in ragged clothing, marked by desperation and zeal. There, eyes wild with the promise of violence. Maheo reacted instantly, drawing his spear with a hiss of motion sharpened by countless battles. His face tightened, muscles coiling as he stepped in front of Clara and the infants. The desert's still air exploded into a frenzy of clashing steel and shouted curses. Blow after blow exchanged with brutal precision. Maheo fought not just with strength, but with fierce cunning, parrying an arrow mid-flight, sidestepping a desperate charge, each movement a dance with death. Clara dropped to her knees, clutching the children tighter, rocking them softly amid the chaos. Her own fear roared, but sheer will bolstered her hands and heart. Then came a sudden, searing pain as a jagged blade found Maheo's side. The warrior stumbled, grit clenched between teeth that bled silent curses. His leg buckled precariously, but he drove deep the spear into the nearest assailant's chest, a guttural cry scattering the oncoming threat. The attackers faltered, then fled into the gathering darkness, wounded, angry, but defeated, for now. Maheo leaned heavily against a sun-warmed boulder, hand pressed over the blood seeping from the wound. Clara scrambled to his side. The twins nestled safely between them, their small chests rising and falling in fragile rhythm. She pressed cool fingers to the gash, her voice trembling but fierce. "You've saved us all." He shook his head slowly. Exhaustion and pain etched deep into his features. This is only beginning. They will not stop while the children live. The twilight deepened, and from the shadows at the edge of the battle-worn clearing came the urgent sound of hooves and soft calls, a relief tearing through the tension. Figures emerged, swift and sure, led by a familiar presence, Taina, her eyes blazing with resolve and command. Behind her, a tide of Apache warriors surged forward, weapons gleaming softly under the moonlight. "We are not alone," Taina's voice rang out, steady and unwavering. Her gaze flickered to Maheo's wound, then softened toward Clara and the infants. "We come for the children and their protectors." The attackers ground to a halt, unwilling to face the full fury of the Apache clan. Their retreat was swift, shadows swallowed by the night, as if the desert itself had reclaimed them. The immediate threat faded like a brutal storm passing, but the cost was clear. Maheo sagged with relief and pain, finally allowing Clara to wrap his arm over her shoulder as the healers converged. The night air filled with whispered prayers and the flicker of firelight, offering a modest sanctuary amid unyielding danger. Clara looked down at the twins, their soft breaths steadying a fragile heartbeat amid chaos. Her voice was barely a whisper, trembling with hope, yet weighed by the path ahead. "We have a chance because they came." Maheo met her gaze, eyes fierce beneath the moon's glow. "But the hunters will return. The desert is wide, but it closes in fast." Together, beneath the endless sky, scattered with cold stars, they took their first steps toward a guarded future. Their fragile alliance, the only shield against the dark storm gathering beyond the horizon. And far away, in the creeping night, watchers waited, silent and unyielding. The battle was not over. In the heart of the Apache camp, the air hung thick with tension, sharp as the desert heat that had faded only hours before. Clara, fragile yet fiercely determined, sat on the rough-hewn bench near the fire's dying embers, her gaze wavering between hope and unease. Her newborn twins, swaddled tightly against the cool night breeze, rested in her arms, small miracles caught between two worlds. Yet the warmth of the clan, once a balm to her wearied soul, was now tainted with suspicion. Around her, the council gathered in a semicircle, their faces carved from years of hardship and wary wisdom. Eyes flitted toward Clara with a mixture of guarded curiosity and old fears. Whispers curled like smoke through the circle. Was this white woman a blessing or a curse? The soft murmurs hinted at an ancient unease. The presence of settlers had often meant bloodshed and betrayal. Now here she was, carrying not one, but two children, marked with the rarest signs of their people's sacred bloodlines, an omen many feared. Maheo stood close, his posture rigid but resolute. His weathered hands rested lightly on the butte of his spear, while his dark eyes held steady as he spoke in measured tones. "These children are more than flesh and blood," he told the council. "They carry the legacy of old prophecies, a hope we cannot ignore." His voice, tempered with the weight of his years and many battles, sought to bridge the widening chasm between tradition and necessity. Yet not every gaze softened. Resistance lurked beneath the surface. Taina, Maheo's sister and the clan's revered healer, moved with quiet grace to Clara's side, offering the cool comfort of her presence. Her eyes, sharp and penetrating, burned with protective fire. "Fear shadows our hearts, but we must see beyond it," Tena urged. "These children, this woman, they are under our watch now." Her words carried the weight of a fragile truce, but in the undercurrents of the gathering, hard questions still circulated like desert dust storming the camp. Clara's breath hitched as she faced the council's silent judgment. The language barrier, the cultural divide, it all felt like a grinding weight against her chest. Yet the fire behind Maheo and Tena gave her courage. Her voice, though soft, held the fierce conviction of a mother's love. "I am no threat," she promised in broken syllables, and with hands trembling yet steady. "They are my children. I will protect them with all I have." Every word was a lifeline cast into a sea of doubt. The tribe's murmurs swelled once more, a swirling tempest beneath stoic faces. Stories of old battles and betrayals whispered on the wind, challenging Maheo's vision of refuge. But before the council could reach a fragile consensus, a sudden commotion at the camp's edge shattered the uneasy calm. Sentinels shouted a warning, voices sharp with alarm. The tribal drums stuttered. The surface of this unfamiliar woman was a fire that refused to be quenched, an unyielding courage born from the instinct to protect her newborn twins. She watched as Maheo moved among the warriors, steady and purposeful, bringing both the weight of tradition and the urgency their situation demanded. Tena hovered near Clara, her sharp eyes occasionally flickering toward the gathered tribe, some brimming with doubt, others with cautious resolve. The council debated in low murmurs, voices woven from suspicion, fear, and ancient memories of blood spilled on these very sands. To accept the children and their mother was not merely a decision. It was a fracture in the tribe's fragile peace. The nights here were long and heavy. Stars spun coldly overhead, indifferent to the echoes of human hearts struggling below. Clara, wrapped in a coarse blanket, cradled her twins, their small bodies fragile vessels, against the looming tempest of fate. Despite the barrier of different worlds between her and the tribal elders, she resolved silently, fiercely. These were her children, part of this land now, and she would fight for their right to live under this vast sky. As the fire's glow flickered, casting dancing shadows that seemed to mimic the restless spirits of the desert, a commotion erupted beyond the earthen enclosure. Sentinels' warning shouts shattered the uneasy calm, their voices rough and urgent in the night air. Drum beats responded immediately, thrumming a sharp cadence of alarm through the camp's heart. Figures emerged from the darkness, shadows draped in the malevolent intent of Kale and his followers, their faces hardened by fanaticism and marred by countless battles of belief, cut through the night with cold precision. They moved as whispers of death, eyes gleaming with a promise of uncompromising violence. Their demand was simple, chilling, and relentless. The children must be surrendered, or the fires of war would consume the camp. The council was thrown into chaos, a storm of fear and resolve, clashing like the desert winds before a violent sandstorm. Flames from torches flickered madly, elongating. Faces that quivered between hope and dread. The air was thick with the scent of smoke and raw anticipation. Maheo stepped forward from among the defenders, spear raised and eyes blazing with the fierce pride of a man prepared to guard his blood and honor with his very life. Taina's voice cut through the tumult, clear and commanding, rallying the camp's defenders with the unyielding spirit of a healer who knew that strength must sometimes be wielded as force. Clara felt her heartbeat hammer in her chest, equal parts fear and an unspeakable strength rising from the depths of her soul. The twins nestled closer against her, their soft breaths an anchor amid the growing storm. Though isolated by language and custom, she was no longer an outsider here. The fight for survival was no longer theoretical. It was fierce, immediate, and demanding. The winds carried the promise of bloodshed, and the desert night seemed to hold its breath in grim anticipation. Clara steeled herself, knowing the battle for the future of her children and the fragile hope they embodied was only just beginning. The camp trembled beneath the weight of betrayal. Shadows gave way to roiling chaos as the traitor's act shattered the fragile trust painstakingly built between Clara and her adopted kin. The opening breach was sudden. Whispers turned to urgent cries, and trembling hands that should have defended now reached out to grasp the price of survival in cold alliance. The night air, thick with dust and fear, electrified with the harsh clang of war, stirred from within. Maheo's eyes darkened as he confronted the traitor, a figure once embraced, now a dagger thrust into the heart of their sanctuary. His voice cut through the turmoil, laced with quiet fury and sorrow. "You have condemned us all." The betrayal shook the camp's core, ripping apart the fragile shield they had woven against the relentless shadows hunting the twins. Clara, heart pounding like thunder in her chest, wrapped her trembling arms tighter around her infants. Every instinct screamed to flee. Yet the bond forged with the Apache, a bond tempered in shared peril and tentative hope, held her rooted. Tanya hovered close, her eyes fierce as a cornered animal, ready to defend those in her care. Her presence was a fierce counterpoint to the stirring dread, a promise that they would not surrender without a fight. The uproar outside grew. Kale's followers, those dark harbingers of fanaticism, surged forward with merciless intent, spurred on by the traitor's guidance. Flames from torches flickered wildly against the encroaching figures, casting wild, ambiguous shapes against the dust-swollen sky. Every echo of a shout, every rattling step, pressed the camp closer to the brink. Maheo rallied the defenders, his spear a steady beacon cutting through the tide of fear and confusion. "Hold the gates! Protect the children!" His voice echoed with the authority of a leader born of fire and blood. The warriors fell into disciplined ranks, muscle and will converging into a single bulwark against oncoming darkness. Clara, though still learning the ways of this world so foreign and fraught, found within herself an unyielding resolve. The children stirred at her breast, unaware of the war igniting around them. She whispered promises, voice roughened by fear, but strengthened by love. A fierce litany binding her to the land, to these people, and to a hope that refuse to die. The camp's defenders braced as the first clash thundered, a storm of metal and raw defiance. The traitor's shadow loomed, but the unity forged in desperation held firm. Taina's sharp command cut through panic, weaving a shield of fiery will across the lines. Each breath drawn was a prayer, each heartbeat a drum of resistance. Outside the fray, Kale's men advanced with cold, ruthless purpose, their fanaticism a dark fire fueling their onslaught. The desert night echoed with the clash of ideals and steel, where ancient prophecy and brutal ambition collided beneath the indifferent stars. Amidst the fury of battle, Maheo met Kale's gaze across the tumult. A silent war waged not only with weapons, but with words and dreams. Their duel was a tempest of conviction and desperation, each strike echoing the deep divides and narrow paths the tribe now faced. In the fiery heart of the conflict, Clara held her ground. Taina's steady presence at her side was a tether, and the trust that had slowly blossomed between settler woman and Apache healer was now unbreakable. The cries of infants mingled with war's roar, a potent reminder that the future depended on every breath they protected this night. As Maheo's spear struck true and Kale faltered beneath the weight of determination and honor, the camp exhaled the tension born through endless hours of fear. The confrontation reached its precarious peak, balanced on the edge of resolution, yet still teetering toward the unknown. Quiet settled momentarily over the bloodied earth, broken only by the ragged breaths of the weary and wary. Clara's eyes met Maheo's. A silent vow echoed in their depths, a promise that no betrayal or violence would sever the fragile hope cradled in her arms. The desert night, vast and merciless, held its breath as the duel's outcome hovered in the balance, a moment suspended between devastation and deliverance. The war was far from finished, but for now they stood unyielding, guardians of a future written not in fear, but in fierce love and unbroken courage. The camp lay heavy beneath a darkening sky, thick with smoke and dust stirred by turmoil. The echoes of clash still lingered in the air, harsh cries, the rattle of weapons, and the pounding of determined hearts. Maheo stood poised, breathing hard but steady, spear clutched with the resolve of a warrior who had battled fate itself. Across the clearing, Kale's fallen form lay among scattered rocks, his fanatic glare extinguished, yet still fierce with defiance. Around them, the warriors of the Apache clan sighed in exhaustion, the heavy weight of survival mingling with the fragile hope now taking root. Taina moved swiftly to Clara's side, her eyes softening as she reached out to touch the twins nestled protectively in the settler woman's arms, a symbol far beyond their fragile flesh. Clara's gaze met Maheo's, and in that silent exchange passed the unspoken vow that had carried them through every hardship. These children were their future. The battle's tumult had drawn the tribe together, breaking apart old fears like brittle stones beneath the desert sun. The council elders, gathered once more under the vast expanse of stars, now listened with new eyes, eyes opened by Maheo's steadfast bravery and Clara's unyielding love. The ancient prophecies that once birthed suspicion now found new voice in the unity forged amidst fire and blood. As the night cruised toward dawn, the council chief rose, his voice calm but resolute. "The children carry the sacred bloodline we long feared and hoped for," he spoke, each syllable weighted with respect and acceptance. "They are not harbingers of destruction, but bearers of our healing and rebirth. Clara is no outsider, but kin to us now, a mother, honored and protected." A soft murmur of assent reverberated through the gathered warriors, low and steady, like the desert wind's promise of renewal. Tana laid a gentle hand on Clara's shoulder, offering the comfort of belonging that had once seemed impossible. Clara, her heart still heavy but filled with newfound strength, smiled softly through weary eyes. Her journey from abandonment and despair had led to this moment, a sanctuary, born not only from stone and blood, but from courage shared beyond borders. Outside the camp, the desert stretched silent and vast, its endless sands catching the blush of approaching dawn. The first rays scattered gold over the horizon, painting the world anew. In that fleeting light, the twins stirred, their tiny feet brushing the warm earth. Maheo settled beside Clara, his gaze tender as he watched the children take their first uncertain steps in a land that had once rejected them. There was no triumph in conquest here, no vanquishing of old wounds by brute force alone. Rather, there was a profound peace, a quiet reckoning born of understanding and the slow mending of fractured spirits. Clara's voice broke the silence, soft but filled with an iron resolve. "They will live, here with you, our strengths joined." Her eyes shone with pride and hope, knowing that despite all the dangers, this desert could be home at last. The twins laughed, pure, unfettered joy that rippled like water over sun-baked stone. Around them, the tribe gathered, faces brightening, as they welcomed the new chapter woven into their shared destiny. Old fears dissolved in the warmth of this fragile community, replaced with fierce determination to protect the future entwined in a child's small hands. Maheo rose, spear lowered, his voice carrying the solemn promise of a guardian. "We stand as one, for the land, for the children, for the promise born beneath these endless skies." His words echoed through the still morning air, a prayer and a declaration. Clara tightened her grip on the twins, feeling the pulse of life steady and strong between them. "Together," she whispered, "we will shape this future, not as separate paths, but as one." The sun climbed, casting long shadows that retreated before the burgeoning light. The desert's harshness had not diminished, but within its ancient heart bloomed a hope newfound and fierce, a hope nurtured in hardship, defended by courage, and sealed by love. As the camp stirred to life beneath the warm glow, Clara, Maheo, and the tribe stood united, a living testament that even amid the vast and unforgiving desert, the bonds forged through sacrifice and trust could sow the seeds of harmony and healing. The story closed not with the silence of loss, but with the vibrant heartbeat of beginnings. the twins running free beneath a sky vast enough to hold their dreams. Guarded by the unwavering watch of those who had chosen to embrace them as family. And in that promise lay the true legacy, a bridge between worlds, a dawn worthy of the struggle, and a future forever changed by the courage to hope together.